a sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me.
Hi, everyone. Well, for some reason, guests don't always respond to the link that there's, like, we book an interview and I send them the Zoom link about 10, 15 minutes ahead of time. They get a reminder a day or so before, and some things happen sometimes. So today's one of those days when the guest that I had scheduled didn't respond, but I do have somebody who's willing to step in last minute, and I'm so pleased about that. Welcoming her back to the show, Lillian Brummet. Thanks, Lillian.
Oh, you're welcome. And I so know what you mean. As a former radio show host myself and a former podcaster, occasionally those things do happen. You know, sometimes it's a technology glitch. Sometimes the people just plain forget and they just, aren't looking at their computer and you're left waiting. So those things just happen. There's nothing we can do about it.
And I don't mind, like, as long as they get back to me at some point. Sometimes people don't respond and then I never hear from them again. And that's one of those things that I find, maybe they feel bad or they feel guilty or something, but they don't have to. We make mistakes. We're human beings, right?
Right, absolutely. There's been the occasional time when I've had something come up, like a technological, something happened, or once one of my dogs had an injured toenail, and so that was distracting for me, and so I couldn't show up at one point, because I had to be there to take care of the dog's toe. So sometimes things happen and you just can't be there, but it's always best to try to be communicative, though.
That's right. You know what I did? This is recently. And I didn't know until 3 days later, I completely missed an interview that I had scheduled with somebody. And she said 3 days later, she contacted me. What happened? It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it happens. It happens to us all. Yeah, we have our schedules and we think we're all planned and plotted out, but something slips through the cracks every once in a while.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone that you are the co-owner of BrummetMedia.ca. You're an author, a blogger, as well as an artist and a wife. So now, where do we start? What haven't we talked about? Because in the first episode, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking that in the first episode, as you were just about to say, we were speaking about, I think, some of the logistics of running a business.
Right.
And some of the behind the scenes activities of that. And, just this morning, I was speaking about sustainable business with another podcaster. And so that is still top of my mind, where we were talking about, greening the property around your business and, how gardening can improve the value of your property and how it provides shade and comforting ambiance for those that are visiting, and how it can provide habitat for bees and butterflies and birds, and how all of that improves the whole neighborhood. When someone walks by, a client walks by, or they're waiting for their son who's come for a drum lesson or something like that, I can see them on the camera and they're browsing, they're walking along the boulevard gardens, they're smelling the flowers. I've seen, grandparents come to pick up their grandchild that was taking a lesson, and while they're with a younger sibling, and they're, exclaiming over the butterfly who just fluttered by the child's face or something like that. Those moments are so precious, and gardening can do so much for so many others. For your business, it makes your business so much more inviting, and if it actually provides fruit for yourself or nuts for your family that you could share with your clients and so forth, that's a bonus too.
For sure. Yeah, I live in a condo, but when I lived in my house, I had hollyhocks and they just overtake. My whole front yard was full of hollyhocks, and I loved it because the bees were around. And sometimes I'd be out there weeding. And I remember one time a teenage boy goes by and he said, "This is such a cool garden." And that response surprised me, because often, younger people don't always, they might like something, but they don't always say. So it made me feel
Right.
so good. He just made my day.
It is. It does. It makes my day too when people walk by and make a comment about the garden or
Yeah.
how it affected them or a memory that it sparks with them, from their past or something. It's really, really interesting where it can take people. Yeah. So sustainable business
Yeah.
is, not so hard. The smallest things that we can do, even if you have a sidewalk in front of your property, your business front, you can still hang baskets.
Mhm.
You can create boxes outside of your window of various flowers or various things. And it really does make your business that much more attractive. People really do pause and visit and smell the flowers. And if it draws more traffic to your doorway, there's your opportunity to draw that traffic into your business. So, yeah.
Right. And as an owner, if you're sitting there anytime and where you can see your window,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And you can see what's out there. Like I can see there's a couple of trees close by. All of a sudden the name of them has gone out of my dogwoods, and sometimes I see
Yes.
the squirrels there and stuff, and it's so pleasant. I really enjoy doing
Yes.
that, watching them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how many studies have we all seen where they say that, a view from a hospital window, just even looking at nature, not even having access to it, but just looking at nature, they notice that those rooms, the rate of healing is much higher.
Is that right? Well, it
Yeah,
makes
much
sense.
higher, much quicker. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense. And now I don't know where you are, where you're located, but in the Fraser Valley, which is where I am, we have a long growing season, right? Much longer than if it was living somewhere like up north, and that makes it for even more pleasant because of the length of time.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so many varieties that grow in our areas. You're only about maybe 16-hour drive west of us. We're pretty much on the same line as far as geographics go. Our particular area is considered a zone 5 for gardening, which means, the first or the last frost is the May long weekend is our very last frost of the season, which means anything that isn't cold sensitive can now be planted, like your tomatoes, peppers, things can then be planted after that date.
Right.
Everything that's cold hardy, there's still a lot of growth space before that. And at the very end of the season, I believe it's October 10th is our very first frost. So we have a good section there of growing times. We're only about, I think, 2.5 weeks behind you, maybe 3 weeks that you have extra beyond us where you live. Your location, you're around a lot more bodies of waters. There's a lot more climate mitigation there going on that keeps it a little bit more mild in your region. Of course, it's very famous for its food production in BC, your area, but ours is also becoming known as the second Fraser Valley, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I just remember where you live.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, and I come from back east,
Right.
northern New Brunswick, where the growing season was very, very short. But there was still like we went out whenever things were growing that were wild, blueberries, little strawberries, anything like that. Like we would always go and pick them.
Right.
And I just want to tell everybody, if you've never seen hazelnuts back east compared to what they are in British Columbia, hazelnuts back east are about the size of your little baby fingernail.
Pretty small, are they really?
Yes, and hard. They would be so hard. And we would pick them while they were still right off the tree, while they were still in their skin.
Yes.
Whereas where here they drop, right? And then people pick them up as they drop. But so it's totally different, so it's quite interesting, really.
That is absolutely, yeah. And there's so many different varieties of hazelnuts and filberts, which really surprised me. So when I went to, we planted one of each, a hazelnut and a filbert in our yard. And when we first planted it, it was just a little tiny sprig,
Yes.
Now it's about 7 feet tall and about 5 feet wide. And I think it's only been maybe I think this will be its 6th year planted. So from a little stick all the way to that big of a plant, it's quite lovely.
Yes.
They really like the water.
Yes.
So the more water and the more nutrient rich the water, the bigger the nuts are going to be, is one thing I noticed. So one of the things that I do is, because of their location, it's really close to the proximity of the hose that I curl up in our back and on that section of the yard.
Right.
And so every time I'm dumping out my compost bucket, instead of rinsing it out at the compost pile, I'm rinsing it closer to where the hose is, which is so much handier. I don't have to drag the hose up to the compost
Right.
pile. But also right there, I dump that water on right at the base of those plants. And so every day, 2 or 3 times a day, sometimes depending on how much I'm cooking and processing and whatever, they're getting all these rinsings from the compost bin, or from the compost bucket itself. Occasionally throughout the day, as I'm cooking in season, I'm going to be saving my cooking water.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of plants right outside my front door where I'll walk out and dump them there. I don't put them on my deck simply because that excess water isn't needed on my deck. We have an automatic system watering our deck. So I take it out the front door. I take a bucket, I collect that water, I take it out to the front door, and I dump it on those plants. Eventually those plants, though, they're getting a lot of water. So at those times when I'm doing like a lot of processing, a lot of washing of vegetables or whatever, those buckets and bowls of waters are now going out to those trees, which are just 5 feet farther away from the front door for me to go out and dump it. So I try to be pretty conscious about that and make sure they get in that extra nutrient water. There's a lot of nutrients in our cooking water. You steam up your
Yes.
broccoli or what have you. You're blanching something for the freezer. That water, you've cooked pasta or anything like that. Once it's cooled, it just becomes this nutrient packed, fertilized water. It seems silly to just dump it down the drain.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. When you were talking about compost, like again, I remember when I lived in my house, and I would obviously compost, and then I would take that soil and throw it over whatever, area I had. And I was always surprised. I never knew what was going to come up in that spot, so when you're talking about, you have the sidewalk. I had my fence and there's some grass, then the sidewalk. So I would pour some compost there. So I had garlic growing there. I had strawberries growing. So I would tell people walking by, help yourself,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is a really great thing about gardening, though, too, is that we can share so much.
Yeah.
We can actually save thousands of dollars in gift giving dollars by giving from our own yard and our own processed foods,
Right.
whether it's jams, jellies, syrups, wine, it could be dehydrated herbs,
Yeah.
it could be garlic, it could be a whole bunch of different things that you're sharing and giving out to people. And they really embrace that. They really do. For those of us who are living in maybe a condo or an apartment, well, then we're looking at, can we grow on our deck? Or maybe we can get a
Yes.
little grow unit inside the house where we're supplying our own cut lettuces and our own herbs. Herbs are so expensive and they're nutrient packed with all of these micronutrients that we rarely get. And so it's really important to add a lot of that into our diet. The more we can grow ourselves and save money, the better. For composting systems, man, there's so many composting systems for apartment dwellers and condo dwellers that are plug into the wall. So you put the product into the machine and it grinds it up, it dehydrates it into a powder, and then that powder can then be sprinkled out at your apartment's lawn or around the bushes or shrubs around your business or your apartment dwelling or in the boulevard where your car is parked. You can just take that and sprinkle it, and it as soon as it rains, it's dust, right? So it just turns right into instant food for the plants, and it's a great way of reducing organic waste. Absolutely.
Right, for sure. Yeah. I mean, for most people here, like we have to compost. We,
right,
by the city bylaws, we now have to compost, and we have two big green bins, I guess you'd call it, where people can go down into the garage and just throw out their compost there, right?
Exactly.
And it's picked up, but at least we do that, which I'm really pleased. Like everything here, we've reduced our garbage that goes to the dump. We have a smaller bin for that. We have a larger bin for recycle, and as well as the compost bin. So I'm really pleased. And when we were contacted about that, we were all, it took a little bit of a learning process, what goes where and what bin, but when the person came afterwards to inspect it, she said, we're way ahead of most condos. with what
Nice.
we're doing, which is really, really nice now because everybody got on board.
That is really nice. You need someone to write an article about that and submit it to your local paper to try and encourage
Ah,
other buildings in the area, be an influencer for sure. Show what you've done and some of the measurable impact and how it's affected the residents or something like that.
yeah,
And you'll get some great coverage for your apartment building as well,
never
your
thought
condo
about that.
building as well. Yeah,
Because
that would be a fantastic way.
yeah, we go further. Like we have one bin for glass, glass
Right.
jars. We have another bin for styrofoam. I'm on the social committee as well as on council. So the social committee, we use all of the pop cans and milk containers, anything that's refundable, and we
Right.
use that, and we put on dinners for everybody in the building, and
Nice.
have social events with that money. Right. So
Right.
we're really doing well, I think, in that regard.
So you have, I imagine, like community room on every floor or in the
Just on one
basement or
floor. It's a
on
very
the one
small
floor?
building. This is only 24 units, so it's
So
not.
a really neat thing to do with those community rooms is to start a reading library. So people can bring their magazines and start doing magazine exchanges, which
Mhm.
is really neat because you're exposed to all different kinds of materials that maybe you couldn't afford to subscribe to or wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. There's also used books. People can bring their books that they're no longer using and allow people to just go ahead and take from them. And that is really helpful too, especially when you have visiting family members and you're wondering like what you could do, what you could have available for them to look at or browse during those moments when you're not visiting. Having a stack of magazines might be just the key for them to have, and then they can bring them back down and let someone else use them. It extends the life of those materials, but it also enriches the literacy in the region too.
We're ahead of you there too.
Fantastic. You're already doing it?
We have 2 bookcases in the lobby, so
Right.
where people can go and help themselves or leave their, we do that.
Right.
And that's been done with, well, it was like that when I moved in here in 20, whatever year it was, I can't remember, 2016 or something. It was already set up. So
That's
yeah,
fantastic. And I like the fact that it's in the lobby because you're inviting visitors now.
yes.
People who are coming in to maintain the building or any visitors can now access that as well, which is that's phenomenal. Excellent.
Sure.
Yeah.
My sisters sometimes they said, hey, can we borrow a book? Of course. You don't even have to
Right.
worry about bringing it back. Just, if you have some you don't want to use,
Right.
feel free to bring them. And that way there's always a constant changing, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just a fantastic way of improving literature and extending the life of everything and reducing budgets and all of that, the cost of everything. Another thing for condo and apartment dwelling, when you're, you have your small balconies, sometimes they're quite small, sometimes they're quite large. So it really depends on your situation, but there's a lot of things that can grow on balconies that are very, very beneficial for the apartment dweller. So say for instance, your patio has a sun-soaked or your balcony has a sun-soaked area. Maybe it's the east side of your balcony, happens to get a lot of sun at a certain time of day. That's a perfect spot to grow those vining type of crops. So maybe it'll be a runner bean that you're growing. It's called a runner bean because it keeps vining all its life. Right. It'll continue to grow. It'll grow like 12 feet tall if you let it, but it will also curl back around and come back down and continue growing on the same trellis. So you don't have to worry if it grows, it won't take over your home, and it will create a wall of this beautiful live greenery filled with, like, say, scarlet runner beans, one of my favorite beans. It has these beautiful red flowers that really attract the hummingbirds and butterflies and bees. And it will provide this shade while you're sitting there. So you can sit there watching the birds, the butterflies and the bees land among and find shelter and nectar and all this stuff. In the meantime, you're getting all these beans that you can freeze or use yourself or share or supply to your communal feast every once in a while if you have those in your rooms, your meetings. So there's all kinds of things that we could do with our own little balcony. So it provides shade. Now that balcony is not as hot, which means your apartment is not as hot, which means you're saving energy. So there's a lot of benefits to it.
And I just want to talk to condo building associations, whatever it is. Stop with your rules where you can't have things like that on your balcony. A lot of places you're not allowed, and I think it's not smart. It's just not smart to have that. I think it's so, as you said, it's so beneficial to yourself and the community and the little critters around.
Yes,
I like
absolutely.
that a lot, you know. I'll
Yeah.
have to get on people here in this building to, can we change these things?
Yes, can we change them just a little bit? Yes. You know, some potted plants that have some taller things, like you can get ornamental corn and ornamental grasses that can get a little bit taller.
Yes.
Some of these are perennials, so if you just put it in a sheltered section of your balcony, it'll come back the following year.
Right.
Those can also provide some shade. They'll help prevent like dust, they'll prevent noise pollution. You can also avoid light pollution, like from street
Oh,
lights and things
yeah.
like that. So you can block out something that maybe makes you squint at night and makes you maybe not want to go on the patio at night.
Yeah.
Put some tall ornamental corns there in a pot, you know, a potted plant, and that'll help diffuse the light, and it'll make it much more pleasant for you.
I love that a lot. Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit luckier than some, because where my balcony faces the side and it's not seen from the street, so I can get away with some things, you know.
Right.
Which I do.
Yes.
But again, you know, we have to get away from where it's considered an eyesore to have certain things on the balcony, right? In my opinion, you know.
Yes.
Why are having plants an eyesore? Who came up with that idea? I don't know where that comes from. So
I would assume that there's a couple of reasons for that. One might be a weight issue. So say if someone decides that, oh, I can garden on my balcony, well, I'm just going to fill the whole thing with dirt and I'm going to, you know, go extreme. So then you'd have a weight issue with your balcony. So there might be something like that. People who maybe don't keep their gardens tidy.
Right.
So say it comes to fall and then it's going into winter and they still haven't cleaned up the vines that are all dead and hanging there. So that might upset a neighbor who's like, oh, you know, I have to come out and look at that. So I could see some conflict in that regard. If they're growing something that might attract pests. So let's say they've grown a cantaloupe plant, but then they decided they forgot about it. And so all these cantaloupes are cracking and they're leaking juices. That's going to attract now some ants potentially coming up onto your deck. So I could see that, you know, to avoid like just blanket the whole thing, they're just going to erase everything. Whereas really just some, you know, some guidelines would be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, we have bylaws, you know, we can set up bylaws. That's easy, in my opinion. It's easy enough to do, you know. I just, again, you know, these like gated community type of mentality. We need to change some of those things. You know, we're not allowed to hang up clothes outside. And, you know, we talk about electricity, you know, the hydro companies are always after us. Stop using electricity for certain. Well, get after these buildings that say you can't have your clothes hanging out there. We're forced to either dry them inside or using our dryers. You know, like I'm all for hanging clothes on the balcony. I have no problem.
Yes, you know, and that is also very location pending. So myself in my region, I when we first moved here, we had a like one of those umbrella things that you poke in the ground and has all these lines and it could collapse. And I was using it all the time in my previous location. We brought it here and I found that it wasn't going to apply to this particular property. The reason why is because right behind us is this dirt alley that people just race up and down. And this road on the other side of us also, it gets quite dusty. And because we're in this wind tunnel in this area, particular location of our home, it wind tunnels in such a way that there's a lot of dust. And so we found that putting our clothes out there, well, we just end up getting dusty clothes.
And
so that wasn't applicable for us in this particular location. So it's location pending. If you're near, say, a really heavy traffic, like a highway, you don't want to be hanging your clothes outside there because now you're getting all the exhaust on your clothes. So there are regions where it's really great to have. One area of our previous yard had this great big maple tree that our neighbor had, but their maple tree, we'd always get what they call maple bugs, these little red bugs. And so I had to move my laundry hanging area to that way other side of the house in order to get away from those bugs who would land on because of the proximity, they would land on the laundry. And then we have all these little red poop spots on our clothing. Well, obviously your clothing isn't clean anymore. So, it's very much location pending when it comes to hanging outside. They have all these systems now, though, where you can hang them inside, the retractable lines.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
going to get one actually, so I can have a green screen behind me here. So when I move, it doesn't wobble around so much. And it's a retractable one, so you can hook it into the thing at the end, and then when you take it off, it just retracts back. So that's a very useful thing to have as an alternative. You can maybe put it in front of your balcony, have the window open so you're still getting fresh air, turn a fan on or something, and let your clothes dry that way. It might be an option. There's things we can do.
Yeah, like usually, like at this time of the year, I'm hanging my things in my bedroom. I've got some racks. I just open up my racks, and because I get a lot of light where I am, I'm south facing, so I just big, and I have big windows, so that's where my laundry goes. The only time my dryer is usually when my daughter comes over and uses it.
Oh yes.
Which is pretty funny, but that's only if she's in a rush, because she hasn't done her laundry. She lives in a building where you got to put your coins in all the time. So I don't mind coming in using my wash and dryer. It doesn't bother me. But anyway, so it's pretty.
And of course, if we are using that dryer, which we do ourselves, then you want to make sure that you're purchasing. If you're using dryer sheets, make sure you're doing the unscented ones, the least chemicals as possible, those fragrances, anything that's left on your clothes. If you smell it, that means there's chemicals on your clothes, and then you're putting them on your body. So, we want to avoid as much as that as possible. We can also reuse our dryer sheets. So save them after you've gone for the first load, save them until you have 2 or 3, and then put those 2 or 3 together, and it'll do another load without getting static. Is another way of reusing them. Second thing to do to reuse them once they're spent, you've run them through a second time, is to take those same dryer sheets now and line your garbage bin bags. So like say in your bathroom and in your office and places like that. So now when it's your plastic bag in your waste bin is lined, as long as it's not wet materials in there, you can now just take that and dump it into the one bag. Say your kitchen garbage bag isn't full, but you need to take it out because it's starting to smell. Dump all these other waste baskets in there, reline them with another dryer sheet, and that bag that was lining that waste basket from all these other areas of your house can be reused time and time and time again, because it's not getting soiled. Nothing's sticking to it. There's no wet anything. And so you can keep doing that. Having a liner of the dryer sheet or a couple squares of toilet paper or something like that will keep your bag looking fresh and clean all the time. So you can keep reusing it a long time.
Great tip. Well, I'm on just about a time here. Okay. Thank you, Lillian. Lots of great ideas you came up with. So it's really good. I'm pleased you were able to step in last minute like this. So just hang on. And I'm just thank you everybody for watching. I hope you're taking in some of the tips. And another thing for dryer sheets, I no longer use them, but when I did, I would sometimes put them in my drawers too, my clothes drawers. So my clothes would smell nice, so that's another tip. So take it all in, and if you can use any of the suggestions for you where you live, do it. It just it's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely.
So, thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope you continue to do so, and take care, and peace out, everyone.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.